Two sisters embrace in 1897. At first, the scene feels calm and loving. Then you notice the frightening detail at their feet. Professor Samuel Morrison carefully studied the glass plate negative that had been found in the basement of the old Blackwood estate in Salem, Massachusetts. The photograph from 1897 showed two young women in their early 20s holding each other closely in what looked like a carefully kept garden. Their white summer dresses and detailed hairstyles reflected wealth and refinement, while their calm faces suggested the strong sisterly bond that Victorian families often displayed in formal photographs. The image was taken outdoors, using natural light, a method that forward-thinking photographers of the time were beginning to prefer over the harsh artificial lights used in studios. The composition was clearly planned with care. The sisters stood in front of flowering bushes and neatly trimmed hedges that showed the family's money and close attention to gardening details. The older sister, who appeared to be around 23, stood behind the younger one with her arms gently wrapped around her shoulders. Her expression looked soft and protective, like an older sister who had taken on the role of guiding and watching over a younger sibling. The younger woman, likely about 19, leaned back into her sister's arms with clear trust and comfort. Her face turned slightly toward the camera, showing a peaceful smile. "It's a beautiful composition," said Dr. Linda Chen, Samuel's colleague at the Massachusetts Historical Society, as she examined the photograph beside him. The photographer was clearly skilled at capturing private family moments. The natural light and outdoor setting made the scene feel far more relaxed than most stiff studio portraits from that time. Samuel nodded as he wrote notes about the technical details of the image for the Historical Society's records. The photograph had come to them as part of a larger donation from the Blackwood family, who had been important figures in Salem society during the late 19th century. Their letters, papers, and photographs were being given to help historians better understand social life in New England after the Civil War. According to the documents, these are the Blackwood sisters, Eleanor and Catherine, Samuel said, reading from the paperwork that came with the collection. Eleanor was the older sister, Catherine the younger. After their parents died in a carriage accident in 1895, the two were known throughout Salem for their charity work and for their deep devotion to one another. As Samuel prepared to catalogue the image, something near the sisters' feet caught his eye. The ground there did not match the rest of the perfect garden. A small area of soil near the bottom edge of the photograph looked darker, as if it had been recently disturbed, standing out sharply against the well-established lawn around it. Samuel placed his magnifying equipment over the photograph and focused on the strange patch of ground. The garden was clearly professionally designed, with every part carefully planned to look naturally beautiful. That made the contrast even stronger. Under magnification, the disturbed area appeared to be roughly rectangular, clearly dug up and then quickly covered again. The soil looked darker and looser than the surrounding earth, as if it had not yet settled. Small clumps of dirt were scattered around the edges, suggesting the digging had been done in a hurry, without concern for neatness. "That's definitely been dug up recently," Dr. Chen said as she looked closely at the magnified image. "The color and texture of the soil don't match the rest of the garden. It looks like someone dug a hole and filled it in shortly before this photo was taken." Unusual time for formal portraits, but a convenient time to avoid the attention of neighbors or passers-by. As Samuel researched the Blackwood sisters further, he uncovered a much more complicated story. Eleanor and Catherine had carefully built a public image of moral goodness and community service that made them beloved in Salem, while possibly hiding dark secrets beneath that image. Their reputation for charity made them nearly untouchable. After inheriting a large fortune when their parents died in 1895, the sisters became wealthy and socially powerful at a very young age. Instead of withdrawing from society, as many grieving unmarried women might have done, they threw themselves into public charity work and gained widespread praise. They founded a home for wayward girls, paid for soup kitchens, and organized clothing drives for poor families across the region. Newspapers like the Salem Gazette often praised them, calling them angels of mercy whose selfless actions represented the highest ideals of Christian womanhood. "Look at these," Samuel said, showing Dr. Chen newspaper clippings from the mid-1890s. The sisters appeared in nearly every report about charity work in the area. They were seen as pillars of the community. completely beyond suspicion. But as Samuel dug deeper into records, small inconsistencies began to appear. The home for wayward girls had an unusually high number of residents who disappeared without clear explanation. Officially, these girls were said to have returned to family or found work elsewhere, but there was no proof of where they went. Church records showed that several young women who stayed at the Blackwood institution simply vanished from all records. There were no forwarding addresses, no letters, and no signs of them appearing in nearby towns. The pattern was troubling enough to cause quiet concern among church officials, though no formal investigation ever followed. Samuel also learned that the sisters focused their help on young women with no family or social ties. These were girls whose disappearances would likely go unnoticed and unchallenged. They were choosing vulnerable victims, Dr. Chen realized as they reviewed the cases, young women with no one to ask questions if they disappeared. The charity work provided perfect cover. The sisters' image of moral purity gave them protection from suspicion that poorer people would never have received. Samuel's research showed a clear pattern of disappearances that authorities had ignored. Unwilling to accuse such respected women between 1895 and 1898, at least 12 young women connected to the Blackwood home vanished without a trace. Most were orphans, immigrants, or girls rejected by their families, people with no power or protection. Here's the pattern, Samuel explained as they laid out the timeline. The sisters would offer shelter and kindness, earning trust. After weeks or months, the girls would disappear, with explanations that could never be verified. Police records showed that some disappearances were reported, but investigations were weak and quickly dropped. The sisters' status shielded them, and officials accepted their word without demanding proof. One document stood out to Samuel, a letter from the sister of a missing girl, begging the police for answers. The police chief's reply was cold and dismissive, saying the Blackwood family's explanation was enough, and no further action would be taken. The class system protected them completely, Dr. Chen said quietly. Poor, desperate girls could vanish, and no one powerful cared enough to look closely. Samuel also discovered that Eleanor and Catherine were careful to avoid obvious patterns, changing timing and methods so suspicion would not easily fall on them. They had spread the disappearances across several years. They used different stories each time to explain why girls had left their care, and they continued their charity work with enough real success stories to keep their image as true philanthropists intact. Because of this, few people questioned them. The 1897 photograph now felt dark and threatening, no longer innocent. It appeared to have been taken shortly after one of these disappearances, with the disturbed ground at the sisters' feet possibly marking the final resting place of their most recent victim. The timing and setting suggested the photograph may have been taken as a private moment of remembrance, celebrating how well they had hidden the evidence. C.E. Samuel's detailed digital study of the 1897 image revealed even more clues that strengthened his belief that the disturbed soil marked a burial site and not harmless garden work. Using special software meant for archaeological photo analysis, he examined slight differences in soil color and density that the naked eye would miss. The results showed signs typical of a grave that had been quickly refilled. The soil patterns confirmed that earth had been removed and then replaced without being packed down firmly like the surrounding ground. The uneven surface suggested rushed work, with no effort made to restore the lawn to its original condition. "Look at these density changes," Samuel said, showing Dr. Chen the computer-enhanced images that highlighted the different soil layers. "These patterns match what we see when something large is buried and the dirt is put back without proper compression. The slight sinking at the edges shows the ground has already started to settle as the loose fill compacts on its own. Even more disturbing were the signs that the sisters themselves had taken part in the digging. A closer look at their clothing showed not just general dirt marks, but soil patterns consistent with kneeling and digging. The placement of dirt on their dresses matched what would be expected from someone digging a grave, rather than doing light gardening. Samuel also noticed signs of physical strain. Their hair, though styled carefully for the photograph, appeared to have been quickly fixed after becoming messy. Small scratches on their arms, partly hidden by their sleeves, suggested contact with thorns or rough surfaces, as if they had dragged something heavy through the garden. The sisters' position in relation to the disturbed soil now seemed intentional, not accidental. They had chosen to stand directly over what looked like a fresh grave. This made the photograph feel less like a family portrait and more like a private celebration of their success in hiding a crime. "They're celebrating," Dr. Chen realized as she studied their faces again. Those smiles aren't just affectionate. They show shared pride and satisfaction. They wanted to remember what they had done. The outdoor setting and the timing also made more sense now. Late afternoon light would have been bright enough for photography while keeping neighbors from clearly seeing what was happening in the Blackwood garden. The natural lighting was chosen not for beauty, but for secrecy. As Samuel searched for records of who might have been buried there around the time of the photograph, his attention focused on Martha Sullivan, a 17-year-old Irish immigrant who had been living at the sisters' charitable home and had disappeared just days before the photo was taken. Martha's case stood out because, unlike many other missing girls, she had formed connections within the Salem community. Some people later asked about her when she vanished. Martha arrived at the Blackwood home in June 1897 after losing her job as a domestic servant when her employer moved to Boston. With no family in America and little money, she was thankful for the sisters' offer of shelter and help finding work. Church records described her as active in services and well-liked by other young women. Martha was different, Samuel explained to Dr. Chen as they reviewed the files. She had started building relationships outside the Blackwood home, which made her dangerous if she noticed or suspected anything. Samuel found proof that Martha had been asking questions about other girls who had stayed at the home and then vanished. A letter she wrote to a friend working at another charity in Boston showed growing fear. In the letter, dated August 15, 1897, just 2 weeks before her disappearance, Martha wrote that she feared something terrible had happened to Mary and Susan. She noted that Mary had promised to write and never did, and that Susan had left all her belongings behind, which made no sense if she had truly found work. Martha planned to speak to Father O'Brien about her worries. The letter was never sent. Martha disappeared before she could mail it. The unfinished letter was found among her belongings at the Blackwood home and preserved in the sisters' papers. This suggested they had discovered her doubts and acted quickly to stop her from exposing them. Samuel confirmed through analysis that the photograph was taken on August 30, 1897, exactly 2 weeks after Martha wrote the letter. This timing strongly suggested that Martha had been killed and buried shortly before the photograph was taken, making her the most likely victim beneath the sisters' feet. Church records showed Martha was scheduled to meet Father O'Brien on August 29, 1897. When she failed to appear, church officials accepted the sisters' claim that Martha had suddenly received a job offer in Boston and left immediately. However, Martha never collected her final wages from her former employer and never contacted friends to say goodbye. These warning signs were ignored because of the sisters' reputation for honesty and charity. Samuel's investigation revealed that the Blackwood sisters had created a careful system for finding, isolating, and killing vulnerable young women over several years. Their charity work served both as a disguise and as a way to find victims. Their actions showed planning and psychological control that allowed them to operate undetected in a close community. Their choice of victims was deliberate and cruel. They targeted young women with no family or support, orphans, immigrants, and girls rejected by their families. These victims were chosen not just for their weakness, but because their disappearances were unlikely to lead to serious investigations. They used their good name to reach the most vulnerable people in Salem. Samuel told Dr. Chen. The home for wayward girls gave them a perfect excuse to interact with desperate young women while appearing to help them. Evidence showed the sisters improved their methods over time. Early disappearances in 1895 caused some concern, so they responded by spacing the killings farther apart and creating more believable stories. They also learned to manipulate their victims' emotions. Documents suggested they enjoyed psychological games, switching between kindness and cruelty to create fear and dependence. A diary fragment found among Eleanor's papers revealed her disturbing pleasure in this control. She wrote about playing a game with a new girl, telling her that Mary had written happily from Boston, then showing her Mary's dress that had supposedly been left behind. Eleanor described enjoying the girl's fear when she realized Mary would never have left without her only good dress. The sisters also used their wealth and social influence to block investigations and silence doubts. Their donations bought loyalty from churches and officials, and they timed their crimes during busy community events to reduce attention to missing persons reports. Several of the disappearances had taken place during harvest festivals, church events, or other public celebrations, when the community's attention was focused elsewhere. The 1897 photograph now stood as more than proof of a single killing. It appeared to document a wider killing spree that had taken at least 12 lives and possibly more, all hidden behind a mask of Christian charity and devoted sisterhood. Samuel's investigation showed that some people in Salem had suspected something dark was happening at the Blackwood home, but their worries were repeatedly dismissed or quietly silenced by authorities. Some officials were truly fooled by the sisters' good reputation, while others may have helped hide the crimes to protect the town's image and their own positions. Father Michael O'Brien, the priest who was meant to meet Martha Sullivan about her fears, had kept private notes that revealed his own concerns. His personal journal, stored in church archives, showed that other young women had come to him with similar worries about missing friends from the Blackwood home. Each time, his attempts to look deeper were blocked by church leaders who feared public scandal. In a journal entry from September 1897, shortly after Martha vanished, Father O'Brien wrote that the bishop had instructed him to avoid any action that might damage the Blackwood family or their charitable partnerships. He noted that the sisters' large donations were considered too valuable to risk over what were called unproven concerns about girls described as unreliable and transient. Samuel also uncovered proof that local police had received several reports about missing girls from the Blackwood home. These reports were quietly pushed aside after officers were told by superiors to avoid serious investigations that could embarrass powerful families. Letters from the police chief showed pressure from city officials to protect Salem's reputation as a safe, orderly town where charities operated without trouble. Neighbors had noticed strange behavior at the Blackwood estate as well. Some had seen late-night digging in the garden, but most chose not to report it. One letter Samuel found was from a nearby homeowner who had seen suspicious activity, but convinced himself it must be normal landscaping work. He believed that women of such moral standing could not possibly be doing anything wrong. The Salem Gazette played its part too, regularly publishing praise for the sisters while ignoring or downplaying negative information. Samuel discovered that the paper's editor received significant advertising money from businesses tied to the Blackwood family, giving strong financial reasons to keep coverage positive and silence damaging stories. The whole community was involved, Dr. Chen said as they reviewed the evidence of long-term cover-ups. Whether through being deceived, choosing not to see the truth, or actively helping hide it, those with the power to stop the killings chose to protect the murderers instead of the victims. The class structure of late 19th century New England had created ideal conditions for killers who knew how to exploit social bias and economic dependence. Poor and vulnerable young women were treated as disposable, while wealthy benefactors were valued for their money and reputation more than for the lives they claimed to protect. Samuel understood that the 1897 photograph was not only evidence of murder, but proof of a community's moral collapse. It showed what can happen when social respectability is placed above human life. His research into the final stage of the Blackwood sisters' crimes revealed that the killings continued for at least 2 more years after the photograph was taken. During that time, the sisters became bolder, and the number of victims increased as they grew confident that no one would stop them. The image now seemed less like the end of their crimes and more like a celebration of success and a sign of how untouchable they felt. By 1899, the sisters had refined their systems so well that they were killing about 1 young woman every 3 months, while still being praised as Salem's most kind and moral citizens. Their confidence made them careless, leading them to take greater risks and leave behind evidence that would later help expose them. Samuel learned that their final victims included not only girls from their charitable home, but also young women from the wider community who trusted the wrong people. One of these was Mary Catherine O'Neill, a 19-year-old seamstress who disappeared in March 1899 after accepting the sisters' offer to help her find work with a respectable family in Boston. The pattern escalated, Samuel explained to Dr. Chen as they followed the last killings. They stopped limiting themselves to girls already under their care. They began hunting openly, using their reputation to lure women who would normally be cautious. The end of the killing spree did not come from police work or public action, but from an accident no one could hide. In October 1899, heavy storms caused flooding across Salem. Rising water disturbed several shallow graves in the Blackwood Garden, exposing human remains that were seen by neighbors and emergency workers. This discovery forced authorities to act. Even then, the sisters' status gave them special treatment. They were placed under house arrest instead of being jailed right away, and were given time to destroy evidence and align their stories before questioning. Still, the physical proof was undeniable. Police excavations uncovered the remains of at least 15 young women, far more than Samuel had first estimated. Many of these victims had never been officially reported missing, showing that some deaths had gone completely unnoticed. Investigators also found that the sisters kept items from their victims, jewelry, clothing, and personal belongings saved as trophies. These were discovered neatly arranged in a locked room in the house, displayed like exhibits in a private museum of murder. Eleanor and Catherine Blackwood were tried and convicted in 1900. Even during the trial, their social standing and gender influenced the process. Defense lawyers argued that such refined women could not have committed such brutal acts despite overwhelming evidence. The case deeply affected Salem and revealed how privilege and stereotypes can protect even the worst criminals. Samuel's research showed that the 1897 photograph was only one piece of a larger truth that exposed not just the sisters' crimes, but the failures that allowed them to kill for years without consequence. The exhumation of the Blackwood Garden in 1899 shocked even experienced investigators. 17 young women were found buried across the property, some in formal gardens, others in hidden areas meant to avoid discovery. The victims were between 15 and 23 years old, and medical examiners described their deaths as involving prolonged torture followed by strangulation. Eleanor and Catherine Blackwood were executed in January 1901, becoming among the first women in Massachusetts sentenced to death for serial murder. Even their execution caused debate, with some people insisting they must have been insane rather than truly evil. This reflected society's struggle to accept that women could commit planned, predatory violence. The case exposed the deadly effects of class bias and prejudice in law enforcement. Ignoring the disappearances of poor and immigrant women allowed the sisters to kill 17 people while being praised as models of Christian virtue. The Blackwood case became a landmark in American criminal justice. Dr. Chen explained that it showed how gender stereotypes and class bias could create perfect cover for serial killers who knew how to exploit social systems. Samuel's study of the 1897 photograph revealed it as a chilling record of deliberate evil disguised as love. It shows Eleanor and Catherine Blackwood standing over a victim's grave while posing as caring sisters, leaving a lasting image of their confidence that they would never be caught. Today, the photograph hangs in the Salem Police Department's training facility as a warning that criminals can hide behind any image, and that the most dangerous people often appear the most respectable. The case is now used in criminal psychology courses to show how killers can exploit trust and institutions. Modern forensic study of the image still uncovers new details about the sisters' methods and thinking, helping investigators recognize similar patterns today. The Blackwood sisters' legacy remains a powerful warning about the danger of letting privilege protect criminals and the terrible cost when communities choose reputation over the lives of their most vulnerable members.